Chosen one, stop what you are doing right now. Because this message did not find you by accident. Out of every soul searching the internet today, something brought you here. Something ancient, something knowing, something that has been watching over you longer than you realize. And what it needs to tell you cannot wait any longer. There are people in your life who smiled at your face and poisoned the air behind your back. People who nodded when you spoke and whispered when you walked away. People who called themselves your support, while secretly pulling threads loose underneath everything you were building. You felt it, didn't you? That strange heaviness, that inexplicable exhaustion, that quiet voice inside you that kept saying, something is not right here. You were not imagining it. You were never imagining it. What you were sensing was real. What you were feeling was spiritual discernment activating inside you. Because chosen people do not just see the world with their eyes. They feel it, in their chest, in their sleep, in the moments of silence when everyone else is distracted. And you have been feeling this for a long time now. There was a group, a circle, people who positioned themselves close to your light, not to celebrate it, but to control it. They studied your moves, they monitored your growth, they tracked your progress and measured it against their own fear. Because that is what threatened people do. They do not attack what they hate. They attack what they secretly wish they were. And you were everything they could not bring themselves to become. So they organized, quietly, carefully, they built a silent campaign against your name, against your energy, against the very thing inside you that God placed there before you were born. They talked about you in rooms you were never invited into. They planted seeds of doubt about you in the minds of people you trusted. They worked, and they waited, believing that if they could not have what you had, they could at least take it from you. But here is where the story shifts. Here is where the universe reveals something that no human strategy could have ever predicted. Because while they were busy constructing their plan against you, something else was being constructed. Something far more powerful, something far more ancient, something completely outside the reach of their jealousy and manipulation. And it was being built, in your favor. The signs were already appearing. The energy was already moving. The divine hand was already rearranging what they thought they had locked in place. They had no idea what was already in motion. But what happened next changed everything. Chosen one, before we go further, I need you to understand something about the pain you have been carrying. Because it was not ordinary pain. It was not the kind of pain that comes from failure or bad luck or wrong timing. This was a specific kind of wound. The kind that only comes from one place. Betrayal from people you genuinely loved. People you opened your heart to. People you shared your real self with. People who knew your fears, your dreams, your silent struggles, and then used that sacred knowledge against you. That kind of pain does not just hurt the mind. It cuts something deeper. It reaches into the soul and leaves a mark that ordinary healing cannot touch. And you have been walking around with that mark for longer than anyone knows. You smiled through it. You kept moving through it. You showed up for others even while bleeding quietly on the inside. Because that is who you are. That is the kind of strength that lives inside chosen people. But behind closed doors, in the silence of your private moments, you asked God a question. You asked why. Why did the people I trusted the most become the source of my greatest pain? Why did I give so much and receive betrayal in return? Why did I stay loyal to people who were never loyal to me? And the silence that followed that question felt unbearable. Because you did not just feel alone. You felt spiritually abandoned, like even heaven had looked away. But here is what no one told you about that silence. That silence was not emptiness. That silence was preparation. When God goes quiet around a chosen soul, it is never abandonment. It is isolation for a reason. It is the deliberate removal of noise so that something sacred can be heard. And what needed to be heard could only reach you once the voices of those false people were removed from your atmosphere. Think about it. Every person who walked away from you, every friendship that dissolved, every connection that revealed its true nature and crumbled, it felt like loss. It felt like rejection. It felt like proof that something was wrong with you. But that was never what was happening. What was happening was a divine clearance. God was not punishing you with loneliness. God was protecting you from contamination. Because the energy those people carried was never meant to travel with you into the next chapter of your life. Where you are going, the weight of their intentions would have destroyed you. So they were removed, one by one, quietly, completely, and in the middle of that isolation, when you felt most invisible, most forgotten, most unseen, something was being deposited into you, something they could not touch, something they could not take, something they did not even know existed. And that is where it starts to get impossible to explain with ordinary words. Because the next thing that happened was not coincidence. It was not luck. It was not timing. It was a sign, the first of many, and the moment you hear it, you will understand exactly why you were chosen to receive this message today. And that was only the beginning. You felt the shift, didn't you? Something in the air around you changed. It was subtle at first. A strange stillness. A quietness that felt different from the silence you had grown used to. Like the moment before a storm stops, and everything in nature holds its breath. You noticed it but could not name it. You sensed it but could not explain it. But deep inside your spirit, something ancient recognized exactly what it was. The battlefield had changed, because here is what most people never understand about spiritual warfare. It does not always look like chaos. It does not always feel loud or dramatic or obvious. Sometimes it looks like a friendship that slowly grows cold for no reason. Sometimes it feels like doors closing that should have stayed open. Sometimes it sounds like whispers in rooms you walk into, that stop the moment you arrive. That was not your imagination. That was not paranoia. That was the evidence of an organized energy working against your name in the invisible realm. And it had been operating longer than you realized. There were people coordinating, sharing information about you, building a quiet narrative designed to dim your light before it could fully ignite. They met without you, they planned without you, they constructed a version of you that existed only to justify their fear of you. Because that is the thing about people who carry darkness inside them. They cannot tolerate being near someone who carries light, not because your light was arrogant, not because you flaunted it or weaponized it, but simply because your presence exposed what was missing in them. And that exposure felt to them like an attack. So they responded the only way small energy knows how to respond. They tried to extinguish the source. They spoke against your character. They questioned your motives. They reframed your silence as arrogance and your strength as aggression and your peace as something suspicious. And some people believed them. And that hurt you in ways that still have not fully healed. Because you never defended yourself the way they expected. You never descended into their level. You never fought with your mouth the way they fought with theirs. And they mistook that restraint for weakness. They thought your silence meant you did not know. They thought your calm meant you were unaware. But chosen ones do not fight in the realm where their enemies feel comfortable. Your silence was not weakness. Your stillness was not surrender. It was obedience to something higher. A quiet knowing that the battle you were in was not yours to win with words. And then, the energy started moving in a direction they never predicted. The very thing they built against you began to crack. Slowly, silently, from the inside, something invisible had entered the architecture of their plan and was dismantling it piece by piece without a single person being able to stop it. And you were nowhere near it when it began to fall. Because that is how divine protection operates. It fights for you in rooms you never entered. It dismantles what was built against you without requiring your presence or your effort. But the next sign was impossible to ignore. There is a moment that comes in every chosen person's journey. A single moment, quiet, unremarkable on the outside, but inside, everything cracks open. It is the moment you stop asking why this happened to you, and you begin to understand that it happened for you. Not to break you, not to humiliate you, not to prove that the universe had forgotten your name, but to position you, to strip away everything that was never truly yours, to clear the path for something so significant that it required a season of suffering to make space for it. And that moment, chosen one, is arriving for you right now. Because what those people never understood, what they could not have known even if they tried, was that every action they took against you was being recorded. Not by human eyes, not by cameras or witnesses or written evidence, by something far more precise, far more patient, far more powerful than any courtroom or jury they could have imagined. The universe keeps perfect records. Every whisper made against your name, every door quietly closed in your face, every opportunity redirected away from you through manipulation and jealousy. It was all documented, in the fabric of spiritual law, in the ancient mathematics of cause and effect that governs every soul that has ever walked this earth. And that ledger was about to be balanced. But here is what makes your story different from others who have been betrayed and broken. Most people who endure what you endured become bitter. They survive the betrayal but lose themselves inside the anger of it. They spend years rehearsing what was done to them, replaying conversations, reconstructing timelines, building cases in their minds against people who have long since moved on. And in doing so, they unknowingly hand their destiny over to the very people who tried to steal it. But you did not do that. Something inside you, even in the deepest moments of pain, refused to become what hurt you. You stayed soft when hardness would have been easier. You stayed silent when retaliation would have felt satisfying. You stayed faithful to something you could not yet see, trusting a process that had not yet revealed its purpose. And that faithfulness, that quiet unbreakable loyalty to your own soul, is precisely what activated what is coming next. Because destiny does not respond to noise. Destiny does not accelerate for those who demand it or chase it desperately. Destiny moves toward stillness, toward patience, toward the soul that has proven, through fire and silence and loss, that it can be trusted with greatness. And your soul has proven exactly that. Every day you chose peace over revenge, you passed a test. Every night you cried privately and still showed up the next morning, you passed a test. Every moment you extended grace to people who deserved none from you. You passed a test, and the results of those tests are about to be revealed in a way that will leave even you breathless. Because the awakening that is coming for your life is not small. It is not a minor improvement or a slight upgrade or a quiet second chance. What is coming is a complete reversal, and the people who built themselves up by pushing you down are about to witness something they never prepared for. But what they discovered afterward shocked them. They thought it was over for you. That is the part that makes what happened next so extraordinary. They had written the ending of your story in their minds. They had decided your ceiling. They had agreed amongst themselves that you were finished, that the damage they had done was permanent, that you would never recover from what they had carefully constructed against you. They were so certain, and that certainty, that arrogant unshakable belief that they had won, is exactly what made them stop watching. Because when people believe a battle is finished, they stop guarding the battlefield. They celebrated too early. They relaxed. They turned their attention toward their next target, already moving on from you like you were a chapter they had successfully closed. But God had not closed that chapter. God had not even finished writing it. And in the silence of that season, in the quiet that felt like absence but was actually acceleration, the most important transformation of your life was already underway. Think about a seed buried underground. No light reaches it. No one can see it. From the surface it looks like nothing is happening. It looks like the earth has swallowed something and forgotten it completely. But underneath, in the darkness that looks like death from the outside, something miraculous is forming. Roots are reaching. Strength is building. A structure is being established so deep and so permanent that when it finally breaks through the surface, no storm will ever uproot it again. That was you during the season they thought they had buried you. You were not dying. You were not defeated. You were not the cautionary tale they were already telling about you in whispered conversations. You were becoming, and the person you were becoming was someone they had no framework to understand. No strategy to counter, no weapon powerful enough to slow down, because you were no longer operating from the wounded version of yourself they had targeted. Something had shifted in your foundation. The pain had done what pain does to chosen souls when they refuse to be destroyed by it. It had purified you. It had burned away every false layer, every performance, every version of yourself you had constructed to earn the approval of people who were never truly in your corner. And what remained after that burning was something raw and real and completely undefeatable. The most authentic version of you had emerged from the fire, quieter than before, calmer than before, but carrying a power so different from anything you had felt in yourself previously, that even you did not fully recognize it yet. But the universe recognized it, and the universe began to move in ways that human logic cannot fully explain. Opportunities that had been rerouted away from you began finding their way back. Doors that had been quietly closed against you began developing cracks of light around their edges. People of genuine alignment, souls carrying real intention and real energy, began appearing in the periphery of your life. And somewhere in the camp of those who had worked against you, a very different kind of silence had begun to fall. Not the silence of peace, not the silence of satisfaction, the silence that falls when something starts going wrong. The silence of confusion, of panic quietly spreading, of plans beginning to unravel in ways nobody can explain or stop. Because what they had set in motion against you had turned. And it was coming back. But the next sign was impossible to ignore. There is a law written into the foundation of this universe, older than any religion, older than any scripture, older than the oldest human civilization that ever tried to put spiritual truth into words. It is simple, it is absolute, it is completely without exception. What you send out returns to you. Not maybe, not sometimes, not only when circumstances align perfectly. Always, completely, with a precision that would terrify anyone who truly understood how it works. And the group that organized themselves against you had been sending out a very specific energy for a very long time. Deception, manipulation, coordinated cruelty disguised as casual conversation, jealousy dressed up as concern, sabotage wrapped in the language of friendship. They had been releasing that energy into the universe with consistency and intention and absolute confidence that it would never return to their own doorstep. But the law does not negotiate. The law does not make exceptions for charm or cleverness or carefully constructed public image. The law simply returns what was sent. And chosen one, what you are about to hear is not something I am predicting. It is something that is already happening. Right now, in real time, in the private spaces of their lives where no performance can protect them. The cracks started small, the way all divine justice begins. One misunderstanding that could not be smoothed over. One relationship within their circle that began to fracture quietly. One secret that was held too long and finally found its way into the wrong ears. And then another, because that is how collapse works when God initiates it. It does not arrive as a single dramatic explosion that everyone can see and document. It arrives as a slow erosion, a quiet unraveling, a series of small failures that individually seem like coincidence but together form a pattern that cannot be denied. Their alliances began to weaken. The people they had gathered around them began to see things they had previously been blinded to. The narrative they had constructed so carefully began developing holes that their words could no longer fill. And the confidence they had carried, that particular brand of arrogance that comes from believing you have successfully buried someone, began to dissolve. You did not cause this. You did not pray for their destruction or spend your energy designing their downfall. You simply stayed in alignment. You simply kept choosing your own healing over the seduction of revenge. And in doing so, you allowed the universe to work without interference. Because divine justice does not need your help to operate. It only needs you to step aside, to trust, to keep your hands clean and your heart focused forward. And while you were doing exactly that, while you were quietly rebuilding yourself in ways no one could yet see, the foundation beneath everything they had constructed was silently giving way. And then something happened that none of them expected. Something so specific. So undeniable, so perfectly timed that even the most skeptical part of you will recognize it as divine. Not random, not coincidence, not the natural consequence of poor decisions finally catching up. This was orchestrated, this was intentional, this carried the unmistakable signature of a higher hand moving through the architecture of your story. And when it landed in the most embarrassing way possible. But what they discovered afterward shocked them.